Okay, so what I'm going to teach you today, what I'm going to talk to you about is the truth that the Constitution basically has very little power, very little authority over anything or anyone or any land. And I'm going to show you what I mean, and then I'm going to prove to you why that's true. So here we have the preamble. This is the actual Constitution that I downloaded from a government website. And this is the preamble, and I have rewritten it here. And what I'm going to do is help you understand why I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you by explaining to you what's in the preamble. So people means those in government. Okay? So I know that this is hard to see, but I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to put it up. It's because I've had to enlarge it large enough so that maybe you could see it. So people means governing power of the country. Okay? This was from a New York case. Governing power are Congress, right? So we the people are the Congress. The Congress is an assembly. An assembly is like a corporation. They're incorporated. They're a body politic. So Congress, an assembly. As a matter of fact, when they write their laws, they say in Congress assembled because they're incorporated. Okay, so when they incorporate, and it's because they've assembled. And when they write their laws, they write in Congress assembled. Corporations are supposed to gather for a temporary time in order to achieve a means to an end, and then they're supposed to disassemble, and they no longer exist. That was the origination of how corporations worked. They've changed it and changed it and changed it until they get to where we are now, where they say, well, they have to be assembled 24/7 into the future as far as they want, and can have property and can own things and is like a real person. But an assembly is actually a fiction because it's a legal thing. Legal things are all fictions, okay? You don't have to agree with it. You just have to understand that it is true. Legal things are fictions. They're artificial beings. They're corporations. They're joint stock companies. They're assemblies. They gather for a fictional purpose, or for a real purpose, but as a fiction. So we the people are Congress, an assembly, a body politic, could be a corporation with a charter, which is what the Constitution is. It's a contract, it's a charter, with a certificate of incorporation. Which may be their oath, which makes them a member. Members are citizens. Citizens of the United States. I gotta enlarge this. Citizens of the United States are officers and employees. And we're coming all the way back around with an oath. Okay, they're federal citizens on federal lands doing work for federal purposes. Okay, that's what the we the people are. That's what they are. Like it or not, you're not one of them because you're not on the federal lands. I'm going to prove this to you. You can roll your eyes and you can huff and puff and you can do all those things that people under cognitive dissonance do. But I'm telling you, they tell you that this is what they are and you ignore it. Okay, so I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to give people the tools so that they can show people that they know how they are not we the people. Okay, the United States. The United States are the federal lands. I'm going to show you that. That's in Article 1, Section 2. I'm sorry, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Find my Constitution again. There we go. Constitution. We're under Article 1. We're going to go to Section 8 and then Clause 17. District. Okay, hold on. Let's look at district. What is a district? I'm going to show you. Is a territory or place of jurisdiction. A place where one has power. So my property is my district. Your property is your district. Your parents' property is their district. A territory doesn't have to be a large place. It's just a place of jurisdiction. I have authority over my property. We collectively have authority over our state, the one we created as inhabitants and settlers. That's where we have the right to make laws. We cannot go to another place and make their laws. Our government, our United States cannot go out on the high seas and create new laws. Our government cannot make laws for international territories or common territories such as the high seas and make laws that other people have to follow. Those are under the laws of nations. So the high seas are under the laws of nations. That's their district, that's their territory. And the law of nations says you cannot impede travel or commerce. So let's pretend that we're on the land now. Does Congress impede our travel? Yes. Are they supposed to? No. Why not? Because it's not their district. Their district are two places. Such district, that's the place where they have jurisdiction, which is power and authority. Here's jurisdiction. And it's written in the same way the Constitution is written. Capital, 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 capital. Right in the middle of these sentences, they got all these words that are capitalized. Now look, states, acceptance, Congress. Okay, but where are their districts? They got one district. That's the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. And then they have places purchased. Forts, arsenals, magazines. Now, these words right here, forts, arsenals, magazines, dockyards, needful buildings, means defense. Okay, defense. With a C, not a S, two different words. Okay, so these people on these lands, which is the District of Columbia and the places purchased for defense, make these things happen. These are their goals. It's their purpose. The entire purpose of the federal government is here. What's the purpose? Goals, desires, achievements. That's what they're supposed to do. And how do they do it? By following everything in the Constitution. Who do they do it for? For the United States of America. The United States of America is not the United States. Okay? It's not the same place. These are the federal lands. These are non-federal lands. This is a district, not the district. Public servants are in the United States on the federal lands. Private citizens are not. Okay, there's ancient maxims that have been around for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. They say, the master cannot be the servant, and the servant cannot be the master. The landlord cannot be the tenant, and the tenant cannot be the landlord. But why do they tax us, okay? That's one of the big questions. How do they control commerce? How do they do all this stuff? I'm going to tell you the answers to all that. But it's all in how you perceive. It's all in bringing this all together and seeing with one eye, a single perception. We all have to have the same perception. And this perception is the perception they tell you you should have. It's in all their papers, all their books, all their writings. Okay? So United States of America, private people. These are private citizens or American citizens. So these people are not on federal lands. The United States of America is not federal lands. So how do these, we the people of the United States, how does the United States gain people? Through a process of naturalization. So when the federal government made federal laws on naturalization, it included on how people went from the independent state, which are the states of the United States, how they became citizens of the United States, federal citizens, federal employees. How did they do that? It's in the naturalization laws. What do those laws say? Okay, so like every couple years they would change the laws, the early laws, the very first ones. Every like 2 years they would change it a little bit. So originally, going back to the very first ones, the people in the independent state that created the federal government, what they would do is they would have a court. And the court was called a court of record. And in this court of record, state citizens, private citizens would apply to become public service citizens. So federal citizens, federal officers and employees called citizens of the United States, citizens of the federal government. United States is federal government. What were the requirements? Some of the first requirements were that the people of the state could go onto the federal lands and work as a civilian for 2 years. The civilian had to display good behavior. Okay, so once that 2 years was up, that clerk could go to the court of record in the state and ask the state to become a federal citizen, because the states were the ones that were supposed to create the officers. They were supposed to select their officers. This is how they did it. And to me, officers are military. Employees are civil servants. So when it says officers, to me, in my mind, I'm thinking military. So members of Congress to be in the House had to be 7 years a citizen. So after 2 years of being a clerk, working on the federal lands with the officers, they then applied, if they had good behavior, they could apply to become an officer. They applied in the state's court of record, and the state had to scrutinize their application, and it was an application process, and decided if they wanted this person to be a citizen of the federal government, meaning that they were going to represent the state in a time of crisis or war, or be part of advising the president if they were senators. So House members had to be 7 years a citizen of the United States, a federal citizen on federal lands. And senators, Senate meaning senior meaning wise, had to have 9 years. And that's why the senators are advisors to the president. The president is the executive officer of the United States of America and the commander-in-chief of the land and naval forces of the federal government. So they were always supposed to work for the inhabitants and settlers who created the lawful state, not this legal state of whatever state you're in. That's a fiction. That's a creation of Congress that's not really supposed to exist. It's not even in the Constitution, sort of. It kind of is, but I'll get to that. So once they applied and they were approved, they had to spend so many years, and then they could be elected into Congress. Okay. Now, the president had to have 14 years. Now, I know what they told us in school. It's because the Constitution was new and they didn't have anybody who could be. No, that's okay. The reason why is because they were in military positions. They were going to declare war. They were going to declare peace. They were going to make treaties. They had to have military background. Okay, they had to be under oath. No one in Congress today, except for maybe 2 people, have those qualifications to be in Congress. I'm going to show you something real quick. You have to understand positive law to understand this. Everything with an asterisk, everything here with an asterisk, title with it's positive. Without, it's not positive. What does that mean? What does positive mean? Positive mean it's been made a law. Without the positive law citation, it hasn't been made a law. The title has not been made a law. So if Congress is following this, they're not following the Constitution, because the laws have to comply with the Constitution. They're following just agreements, contracts, private contracts. Okay, so Congress is not doing things the way the Constitution says, and they show you this because they're not positive. And a lot of things in here are not positive. If you just go here and look real quick, they're not positive. They're not laws. They can't be used in a court of law as evidence of ever having been made a law, because they're not laws. They're not according to the Constitution. I'm going to show you something else in the Constitution. That's Article 2 for the presidency. The president has the executive power of the United States of America, the free areas, and he is the Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and the militia of the several states. What does that mean? He's got 2 offices. He's got 2 positions as the president. Executive of the free areas and commander-in-chief of the federal areas. He's a servant to both America and the federal areas, the free areas and the federal areas. Now, I'm going to do something else here. Bear with me. I'm going to add some more. Something happened. Okay? Something happened, and the federal Congress created a legal state. Legal things are fictions, artificial beings. That's like corporations. They created a legal state. Legal states are called, let's see, let me expand. State of, and then whatever the state is. Okay, so California, Nevada, Nebraska, Kansas, Maine, Maryland, Washington, Virginia. Okay, state of whatever. That's the legal state. I'll show you. It's in a congressional record from 1867. It's in the Congressional Globe. Someone sent this to me. You can find it on loc.gov. This is page 1565. I don't have the exact date, and I know it's hard to read, and I apologize. I can't get a better copy of this. I could type it, but then people would say, "Well, can you send me the reference to the Congressional Globe?" So here it is. It's right out of there. I just added this box to make it bigger, hoping that it could be seen a little easier. It says, this is Mr. Cowan. He's asking the president a whole bunch of questions. One of them is, why, Mr. President, what is a legal state government? Is it a government cooked up for a state here in Congress, or is it a government that the people of the state make for themselves? Because the people of the state that are here, down here, the United States of America, are settlers and inhabitants. They make up the lawful state, the real state, the true state that joined the Union. Then after the Union was created, they created their own states. Okay, they created legal states. Mr. Cowan also asked, who are the people? What people? The people are all persons, black and whites all together. Lincoln, however, on consulting the lawyers, was informed that the word people had two significations. That in its general and ordinary signification, it did mean everybody, whites and blacks, and I don't care about color, that's just what they wrote. But that in its technical or political meaning, it meant the people of a state who were entrusted with the political power of the state. And by what law? By the law of the state. The Constitution is a legal document that allowed these people, certain people, called deputies, according to the Constitution. They were deputies from 12 states. Right here. Deputies from 12 states. Get it so you can see it. Deputies from 12 states that went to Philadelphia and wrote the Constitution and then signed it. Okay? They were called deputies. And they created the federal government, which then created legal states. Why did they need these legal states? They needed these legal states. I'm going to pull up a map of Texas. And I apologize, I don't have one for every state. I only picked up one. And I happened to make a whole bunch of copies of it. And when I realized that they took the website down, where I got the copies of the map, I thought, well, it's too bad I didn't get a copy for all the states. So I had to scan the one I had back into my computer. Oh, funny, I don't have it here. Let's see, where is it? It's here somewhere. So a legal state is a creation of Congress to allow people on the federal lands inside the free state, the independent state. Okay, so this is a legal state. This is the dependent state. I call it a dependent state because it was created by the federal government and it's dependent on the federal government. So it created these dependent states so that all of these people inside the states could receive services because the federal government was not constitutionally able, it didn't have that authority to provide like hospitals, insane asylums, schools, and other things for those people on the federal lands. They couldn't do it. They weren't authorized. So what they did was they created the legal state so that those people could come off the federal lands and use state services provided by these people. And then it made a contract with these people, the free people in the independent states, down here, independent states, free, sovereign, and independent, and then paid them for the use of the services for their people, which made them citizens of the state as well as federal citizens. And doing that, it sort of looks weird because it looks like this dependent state that they created looks like the only state there is to us now, because we don't understand the difference between the two. We don't understand the contracts between them and the contracts with them and the state to provide services to the federal employees. We don't understand that those are contracts. And those contracts are all voluntary. And the voluntary contracts are in the non-positive laws. Commerce and trade. Okay, taxes. Okay, all these things are non-positive laws because they're trying to apply them off the federal lands and they can't. So the real tax code for federal officers and employees are in here, are in Title 4. Here, taxing affecting federal employees, income tax. You can look at that. You can open it up. If it'll ever open. You can go to here and you can click on these and you can read them. And it explains that taxation is for federal employees. Federal officers also. And let's look at the 1939 code that says so. Let's look at the 1939 code. I have to find it. So it'll take a minute. I have so much to show you, but I have to prove everything I say, right? Otherwise, you won't believe me. You'll believe them when they say stuff, because you've been conditioned to believe all this stuff that they say. So to get you to believe me, I have to show you all the proof, right? Makes sense. Oh, I've been around here like twice already, and I don't see my 39 code that I picked up. Let's see. In the 1939 code, it states that taxes are for federal officers and employees Let's look at this picture. One of the first pictures that pops up when you go to the Library of Congress and search Internal Revenue. It says self-service forms rack. Other forms may be secured in room 709. U.S. Internal Revenue Service. Guess who this guy is right here? I know who he is. Guess who he is? He is wearing a seaman's cap, a seaman's jacket, seaman's pants. He's carrying his packages under his left arm. He's a sailor. He's a Navy sailor. That's one of the pictures that they promote. He's picking up his tax forms because taxes are for federal officers and employees. And on the 1939 code, it says it right on the face of it. So if you look up the 1939 Internal Revenue Code, it says that it taxes the income of the federal, the people, the officers and employees in service to the federal government. It taxes their income. Here we go. Here it is. I looked right at it and missed it. Public. What's the public? I told you what the public is, remember? Do you remember what the public is? Federal employees. Public Salary Tax Act of 1939. You're not the public, you're private. If you joined the militia back during the Revolution or the Civil War, you were called a private because you were a part of the militia, and the militia is supposed to be made up of private citizens, not citizens of the United States. An act relating to the taxation of the compensation, that means the federal pay, of public, meaning federal, officers and employees. There's an entire book here. And in Title IV, it's the taxation of federal employees. Okay, is the picture getting a little bit clear? So why do we have the IRS code? Why do we have the Title 26? Well, because if you want to pay taxes, they'll take it. I mean, if you just want to, they have to have a way to take it. Title 26 is not a law. There's no positive law citation in here. It's not a law. It's not a law. It's not a law. Keep telling yourself that. It's not a law because it's not a law. Let me show you this. Jurisdiction. What does jurisdiction mean? I showed you the definition. Let me bring the definition back up. The authority or power which a man hath to do justice, and causes of complaint brought before him. Da-da-da-da-da. Jurisdiction, power and authority over federal areas within the states. I still didn't see my map. It's here somewhere, though. This is a report put out by the federal government. United States Government Printing Office, Washington, 1956 was part 1. 1957 is part 2. Read these. You want to read these. These are on Hathi Trust. They're on archive.org. Some people have gone to the trouble of typing these up and posting them on the internet because back in the day you could only get them as a reference in the state libraries. This is telling you these two reports, and they're lengthy, but they're very informative, are telling you they already know that they have no power over you unless you're a federal employee or you claim to be a citizen of the United States. They only have power over federal areas within the states. And even then, in most cases, it's only a tiny bit of power. And not over people, over just what they do on the land, to make laws for themselves on the land that they use. Everywhere outside of here is the United States of America for free people, American citizens, private citizens. And they created a legal state called state of. And most of the courts are state of whatever in capital letters. That we're suing you for some bullshit and taking your stuff and taking your kids, leaning your house, leaning your property, come taking your property. You didn't have a license for this. You didn't have a license for that. Why did they create the legal state? This is what I'm going to tell you. This is in chapter 1 of this book, this report that I just showed you. Report volume 1, part 1. They call it part. On Hathi Trust and on archive.org and in your state library. Jurisdiction over federal areas within the states. Chapter 1, outline of study. The instant study was occasioned by the denial of a group of children of federal employees residing, federal employees, those are federal citizens, residing, living on the grounds of a Veterans Administration hospital, of the opportunity of attending public schools in the town in which the hospital was located. An administrative decision against the children was affirmed by local courts, finally including the Supreme Court of the state. The decisions were based on the grounds that residents in the area of which the hospital was located were not residents of the state, since exclusive legislative jurisdiction over such area had been ceded by the state to the federal government. This is the needful buildings, taking care of the veterans, and therefore they were not entitled to privileges of state residency. The privileges of state residency, meaning public schools, public hospitals, public insane asylums. They were confined to the federal lands. That was their country. They were citizens of that country, of that place. It's foreign to the United States of America in some certain ways of looking at it. Because the state gave up all right to the land and all right to make laws for those lands, all right to tax the people of those lands. They gave up all rights to them. So they didn't have state privileges anymore. They had to stay on the federal lands. That doesn't mean they couldn't come off the federal lands for some things. That just meant that they weren't state citizens. So when this problem was recognized, what did they do? They passed the 14th Amendment, making federal citizens also state citizens. Okay? So that they could then be state taxpayers and use state services. And they had to administer all those contracts. So now we need an attorney general, and now we need a secretary of state. So the businesses who want to do work with these people and support the federal citizens, could contract with the federal government to support them. And again, we're back to the non-positive laws, the contracts. Okay? And how do I know that they already know this? Besides these two reports, they did something else. They have a GSA, General Services Administration, that keeps track of all the jurisdictions and all the land areas, all the real estate, all the contracts. So that's not the book. This is the front of the book, though. This is the book. It's just this one page. So the GSA, excuse me while I fix this. The General Services Administration. I'm trying to fix this. And my computer just froze right up. Okay, so the General Services Administration keeps track of all the lands, all the contracts that are made between the federal government and the federal areas and the states and the other states and this state and that state and everything. The GSA keeps track of that. And as part of that, they have to keep track of the jurisdictions, because not all federal lands does the federal government have all right over. Some of the lands they only have some right over, so they have codes. Code 1, Code 2, Code 3. Code 1 is they have all lawmaking power. That means it's usually military related, or it's supposed to only be military related. 2, maybe some roads to get from one post to another post. 3, partial, meaning they have a piece of land that they can do some things on, but the state has the rest of the jurisdiction. 4, proprietorial, meaning they have the same power that anybody else has who comes in and buys land. And 5, unknown. So down here, explanation, the number 1 through 5 appearing in the jurisdictional code column indicates the legislative jurisdiction. That's the legislative jurisdiction. Okay? So then the state would have the right to legislate for some areas, state statutes, federal law, statutes at large, acceptance or recordation date. Okay, so this is in that GSA manual that I showed you. All right, let's look for a few other things. Let's look for the form that they're supposed to use. They had created a form where they outline the locations, the exact locations of all their places, and what jurisdiction they have over that place. This is the form. This is an old form. This is not the current form. I don't know what the current form is. I haven't been able to find it. I don't know where they file it. I'm guessing with the Attorney General, because when we looked at the jurisdiction report, when we looked at this, the GSA book references this book, the report. This report was out in 1956, part 2 in 1957. This was in 1962. And the people who wrote this report got all their information from each of the attorney generals in the states. So they're trying to figure out how to write this report, what to put in it, how to interpret the Constitution. And after they did that, they came up with this. And they came up with this form so that they could go through each of the states and document where the federal land was and what jurisdiction they had over it. If they had jurisdictions within jurisdictions, jurisdictions without jurisdictions. That probably doesn't make any sense to you, but as you keep going through this stuff and learning it, you'll start to understand it more, because some of the lands that were given to the federal government were owned by private citizens. So in some cases, the private citizen was sort of landlocked. His land was like landlocked, and there were federal area all around it, and then all around the federal area was state area. So you had private lands inside of federal lands to which the federal government was not given jurisdiction over, but it was inside. So it was like an island within an island, because the federal lands are also called an island within the state. So you have the state, and then you have an island of federal lands, and then inside the federal lands you have an island of private property, to which the federal government does not have jurisdiction over. And they had to sort through all this stuff. Where are their lands? What jurisdiction do they have over them? And in the case of Fort Leavenworth, there is a piece of private property that these people had the patent for that land, and it's been in their family for hundreds of years. But Kansas tried to cede that land to the federal government, but they couldn't, because Kansas didn't own it, and they didn't own it because the family had the patent to it. And so they had to be able to get off the federal land. And so there was a different entrance. They had to put gates, and then they had to put more gates on the other side of the private property. It's kind of a mess. But I think that Fort Leavenworth is the oldest military base west of the Mississippi. Okay. So they have these kinds of forms filed somewhere. Okay. Now they changed the way they style their address. So like state would be the two capital letters, T, X, K, S, M, O, M, I. Okay, for whatever state, F, L, C, A, right? Two capital letters. That's the federal way of designating what land they have, along with a zip code. That's a federal designation. So when you give them your address and you're using their designators, you're claiming that you're part of the federal jurisdiction. So the original states were created by the settlers and inhabitants. But because we were easy targets, I guess, for lack of a better word, it was easy for the federal government to come in and just sort of slowly take over. And how did they do that? I've only got one explanation for you. Now, this manual was published in 2019, and it is unclassified. But in here, this is nothing new. It was published in 2019, but it was all stuff that's been around for a long time. I did a book review on a book called Uncommon Therapy, where a MD called, I think his name was Milton Erickson, talks about how easy it is to deceive people, but he uses this sort of, I guess he doesn't call it deception, but it's kind of deception. It's deception at their will. Okay, they're willing to be deceived to better themselves. So he uses these deceptive type of practices to help people become better people, more productive people, to make positive changes. The military, of course, they use it to as war tactics. Deception is a war tactic. Okay, and if you think our military is not willing to use that against you, then you really need a wake-up call. They will. They do. let's see. Let's talk about a situs. Well, here's a deception here. It's from a Dictionary of Military Terms, United States. Deception. Those measures designed to mislead the enemy by manipulation, distortion, or falsification of evidence to induce him to react in a manner prejudicial to his interests. See also counter-deception, military deception. This is pretty interesting. You should download it and read it. It's not that big and it's not hard to understand. The military uses deceptive practices even on its own people. Let's real quick look at the word citizen. Basically, it means member. Citizen, by Aristotle, in the beginning of the third book of the Politics, defines a citizen to be one who is a partner in the legislative and judicial power. In Black's Law 6, citizen, one who, under the Constitution and laws of the United States or of a particular state, is a member of the political community, owing allegiance. That means having an oath, taking an oath, promising to stay true to that, loyal to that, and being entitled to the enjoyment of full civil rights. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Okay, so just real quick, if DC decides to become a state, it's acting outside of the Constitution, and what it's doing is trying to basically plant a new flag or take over our flag and create a new government. And that's what it will do if it doesn't get stopped. Change of jurisdiction, National Park Service. I emailed these people and I asked them some questions about jurisdiction. They haven't gotten back to me, and they probably won't. Rarely do they get back to me. Here's a Federal Register where it talks about jurisdiction. National Park Services, they want to change from exclusive jurisdiction in one state to concurrent jurisdiction in another state, but it's actually the same state, because they use state of, meaning both the legal state and the lawful state. It's meant to confuse. It's meant to be confusing. That's how they like it, because they keep you in a state of chaos where you don't know anything. You can't figure anything out. If you can't figure it out, what are you going to do about it? You can't do anything about it because you don't know what to do. This is Federal Register, Volume 64. This is Executive Order 13132, 1999, signed by Bill Clinton, never repealed. Acts of the national government, whether legislative, executive, or judicial in nature, that exceed the enumerated powers of that government under the Constitution violate the principle of federalism established by the framers. So all laws not positive violate the Constitution. The Congress violates the Constitution. Domestic security violates the Constitution. Agriculture violates the Constitution. Aliens and nationality violates the Constitution. Banks and banking, commerce and trade, conservation, customs and duties, education, food and drugs, foreign relations, hospitals and asylums. Oh, and highways, by the way, it says it's positive law right here because it's got an asterisk. There's no positive law citation in there. Deceptive practice. Indians, internal revenue, intoxicating liquors, labor, mineral lands and mining, navigation and navigable waters, crime control and law enforcement, public health and welfare, public lands, railroads, telecommunications, territories and insular possessions, war and national defense with an S, not in the Constitution, voting and elections. None of those are laws. None of those are in the Constitution. They violate the principles of federalism. That means the state of, the federal government has created, that legal state is illegal. It's illegal because it doesn't conform to the ideas of the Constitution. Why, Mr. President, what is a legal state government? Is it a government cooked up for a state here in Congress, or is it a government that the people of the state make for themselves? Who are we, the people? Well, Lincoln, my lawyers say it could be everybody, but then again, could be only some people. What kind of answer is that? You're the president? You can't even answer that question? I'll answer it for you. In the Constitution, the people are only some people, the members of Congress. And the president is supposed to make sure that the laws are faithfully executed, which means he's supposed to oversee also the United States of America. But what is he to do when he has a press conference and then the press conference doesn't really talk about the facts? They talk about, oh, he's the president's such a bad guy because he's doing this and he's doing, oh, you mean he's trying to execute the laws? He's trying to end an unjust war? Fiction of law. Fiction of law. Is allowed of in several cases. It must be framed according to the rules of law, not what is imaginable in the conceptions of man, and there ought to be equity and possibility in every legal fiction. So what this is saying is that basically what I told you about how they create assemblies, but the assemblies are supposed to have a means to an end and then disassemble. That's the same as what a corporation is. A corporation is supposed to have a means to an end. It's a corporate body. It's a body politic. It comes together. It does something, and then it disassembles once that means is achieved. So the way I read the Constitution is they assemble in Washington whenever there's some dire need to assemble, such as we're being attacked, for defense purposes, defense with a C. Defense with a C stems from Old French, which stems from Norse, which means fortify. Defense with an S is a Latin word, and it means vengeance. Defense in English is spelled with a C. There is no defense with an S, except for in modern English, they've accepted defense with an S, even though originally there was no defense with an S. They only spelled it with an S because they changed the C to an S whenever they added certain suffixes onto the back of it. Then they would change it according to the rules of grammar. Okay, so the Constitution was meant to be used whenever we had a need for defense with a C. And then once they declared peace, they could make treaties and declare peace. So they would declare war, they would treaty, and then declare peace. And then they would go back to their state. And so the Constitution would be quiet, it would be silent. There would not be any need to have people constantly in Congress making laws, law after law after law after law. There was no need for it because we weren't at war. And this was a document that allowed us to assemble for war to defend ourselves. And then war would be over and everybody would go back home. All right, so let's talk about the particulars. This is a map from an appraisal district website. And it doesn't matter really what's on the map except for right here, down here at the bottom above these black marks. It says Citus address. This is in Texas. Now, notice it says capital T, capital X. That is a federal symbol. When you use the federal addresses, you're using a federal symbol to show the federal government that you want to be in that state they created, the legal state they created to support the government, to support the federal government, not the state created by the inhabitants. Or is it a government that people of the state make for themselves? That's not our state. The legal state they created is their dependent state. It's dependent on them. It cannot secede from the Union. The state of Texas cannot secede from the Union. It cannot become an independent state because it is a creature of the federal government. What can secede from the Union are the people, but they have to do it through a democratic process. It has to be a majority. That's where we're going to run into problems because people are stupid. They won't listen to the videos. They won't read the materials. And if they do, it'll take them probably 10 years to understand it all, just like it did me. I'm trying to make the stuff as simple as I can to help you all understand it. Because once you understand it, you can go out and you can show people this stuff. I've given you everything you need. I've given you everything you need so that you can have it and you can go out and you can show people this is what it means. This is what that means. This is what that over there means. This is why they can't do that. This is why you have to fight back. This is why you have to do what you need to do to regain your independence and sovereignty. I'm not big on the word sovereignty. I really don't like it. I think it just creates more problems than it resolves. But you see this situs. It says situs. Situs and TX means that you're under. Situs means state. It means, so this is a federal state. This is a federal state. TX is a federal state. So whatever your zip code is, it's a federal indicator, just like your social security number is a federal indicator. Just like your driver's license number is a federal indicator. It's the federal legal state. Just like your, your address, your driver's license number, your birth certificate, your social security number. Let's look at Texas application for birth certificate. Here's Texas driver's license. Okay, now I think under here required information, I think it asked me on one of these if I was a citizen of the United States. I remember it was on here. I don't know if why I would have cut that off right there. But this is the application for that. Now I want to show you the birth certificate. Application for a birth certificate in Texas, state of Texas. It tells you it's a legal document, creates a legal name. And what does this say? But what's your name? What's your name? Your legal name. Your residence. It has to have your federal address. And I think down here is where it asks you if you're a citizen of the United States. Okay, so this is a parent's worksheet for child's birth certificate. It's called a VS-109.1, revised 08-2016. There may be a new one that I don't have that doesn't have it like this, but let's see what this says. This information you provide on this worksheet is used to create your child's birth certificate. A certificate of incorporation is what this is. A certificate of incorporation is required to be a part of the assembly, to be a citizen of the United States. The birth certificate, see if I can get all that in. The birth certificate is a legal document. What is a legal document? It's for fictions. Used to prove your child's age, citizenship, and parentage. Your child will use the birth certificate throughout his or her life. The state of Texas is the legal state created by Congress. It's a fictional, I told you, legal means fiction. It's a fictional state government. It's not real. It exists only on paper. This is a paper. It's a legal document. It's a fictional document. Child's birthplace. You have to use the federal indicators. Parent 1, current legal name. Current fictional name. Child's fictional name. Okay, that's the whole thing. Congratulations. Yeah, you're welcome. I just became a federal taxpayer. Okay, so this is how they lien your property. This is how they charge you a tax. This is how they try to get you to get a license, a driver's license, mariner's license, vocational license to be a AC, guy and put Freon in people's air conditioners. CDLs, motorcycle licenses, a certificate or a license to take care of people's kids, child care provider, a teacher, all these things, all these licenses are in the fictional state created by the federal government, the legal state, the fictional state. Legal is fiction. Did I say that enough? If you're annoyed, then you're getting it. If you're not and you're still wondering, well, maybe you need to watch again. I have a lot of videos out. I try to make these videos all the time. Looky here. I just do screenshots a lot. So this is like partially cut out. But if you think this is not a real screenshot, you can go and you can look this up and click on it. This bot comes from over here, Constitutional Authority Statement. I looked up Hank Johnson because he was known to try to pass a lot of gun control laws, and I remembered his name, so I looked him up. And then I went over here, I come up with this, HR 5717, Gun Violence Prevention and Community Safety Act of 2020. And then I come over here, Constitutional Authority Statement, Article 1, Section 8. What does Article 1, Section 8 mean? What does it say? It says they have the right to make the laws on the federal lands. Now we're getting to the juice. Because that section says a lot. And that section is what people use to say, well, you have to pay your taxes. It's in the Constitution. But then they didn't read the rest of the Constitution. If they did, they sure didn't understand it. So let me find the Constitution. Thank goodness, that was easy to find. Okay. So, Article 1, Section 8 starts right here. Okay, the Congress, that assembly, for certain purposes, to promote the goals of peace and tranquility and general welfare and defense, has the power to, on federal lands, that's in Clause 18. It's kind of like a little backwards, like things are misplaced, sort of, seems not intuitive. So Patrick Henry said you have to have a special kind of intuition to be able to understand the Constitution. And I agree with that, because I had read this probably, 200 times, trying to figure out what the hell does this thing mean. And I did not understand it until I read this book, this 2 parts. And believe me, I read it fast because I like answers. I like to know answers. I like to know things. I've always been this way since I was a kid. I questioned my mom so much. I think sometimes she just hated me and wanted me to shut up because I would just say, why? I don't understand. Why? Why did they do that? Why did they say this? Why did they write that about anything? Why? That's just who I am. I can't help it. I still do it. People say things and I think, why did they say that? What did that mean to them? Why did they believe such a thing? That's such a dumb thing to believe. Why would people build their lives around some stupid thing somebody said? I don't understand. Okay, when I read this, and then I went back and started reading the Constitution. I understood. And that report was written by the government, having acquired information from the Attorney General. So the Attorney Generals are putting all these people in prison, and they have no right to do it. The first thing you need to notice is this section 8, is just 1 sentence long, and there's a list of things that they do. And then we know what their goal is because that's in the preamble. They do them on the district and places purchased for defense. It's all supposed to be for defense. The buildings are supposed to be for defense. And then they can do the other things on those lands, necessary and proper. Here's the period. That's the first and last period. All of this is one long sentence. And I told you where you can get this. Google OLRC. You come to a list, go to front matter. You come to organic laws, go to Constitution. You can download this Constitution. Read it. Now that I've explained it to you and you read it, you'll understand it. Taxes, duties, impost, excise on the federal lands, commerce. I'll tell you a story about taxes. Goes back to Caesar in the Bible. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. What does that mean? When Caesar was in charge, it was a republic. And the republic had common lands because there were lands that nobody had bought, nobody could afford to use, so they come under the control of the government until the government decided what to do with it that was for the good of the people, or they could sell them. And they could sell them, they were supposed to sell them for very, very cheap. So there were some lands in the empire that some people just didn't want. So Caesar would give away these lands to poor people. And the poor people were supposed to produce something like a crop, wheat or whatever. And their payment back to Caesar, to give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, was called a tax. It was a rent. It was a lease, okay, for the land. Well, people started to get where they didn't want to pay. And then the tax collectors would come out and they would say, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. You know, what's your portion of your yield that you have to give? So it would be like based on like 2% of whatever they produced, 2% was supposed to go back to Caesar. Okay, so that's the oldest thing that I could find on taxes. So when that tax system rolled over to some of these other countries, those tax collectors became known as bloodsuckers, because, vampires, because they would come to collect the taxes and the people didn't have the money to pay them because they didn't want a portion of the yield, they wanted money. And people were already poor anyway. And they didn't have the money to give, so they started killing people. They started killing their children because these tax collectors then got a portion of the tax, and then the rest went to the king. Well, how did the kings become kings? That's in a book called Divine Right of Kings, an old one. These landowners, these wealthy landowners got together and they wanted to be landlords, but they couldn't because so-called sovereignty for that was under the Pope. So the few of them got together and decided to go ask the Pope, hey, give us some authority, make us kings. Make us kings, and we can have tenants on our land, and we can charge them. And they knew that the Pope was going to want something. So the Pope said, well, I want part. I want a cut. And they said, okay. So they got their divine rights and went back, and they were able to lease out lands and collect taxes, duties, imposts, excise, and all those kinds of things on the land that they owned. And then they were able to collect money, and they didn't have to farm their own land, because there's an old saying that says that if you don't produce on the land you own, then maybe you own too much land. Maybe you should sell it to someone else who can produce and make a living. So if you had land and you weren't doing anything with it, you were committing like a sin. So these wealthy landowners had all this land, but they couldn't produce. It was too much for them. So they thought, well, if we lease out the land, let other people work it for us, then all the land is producing, and we'll be right with God, and we can keep our land. But as a result, they became greedy. Okay, so it's the same with commerce. They're allowed to regulate the commerce coming on and off the federal lands. It makes complete sense, because you can't have contraband, you can't have spies, you can't have people, because commerce is anything that moves. Wartime traffic is considered commerce. So ships going out to sea to attack an enemy is called wartime commerce. I hope you're getting the idea. Post offices and post roads are supposed to be those things on the federal lands. To coin money is supposed to be the use of the federal government to coin money and do the weights and measures. They weren't supposed to coin money for all the people. They can't tell us what money to use. They can't tell us to use the money they coin. They can't do it, because they only have authority on their lands. That's called exclusive legislative jurisdiction. Jurisdiction over federal areas within the states. Here's an old case law. I hope you can see it. Where the United States own land situated within, that was the word I showed you earlier. Situs, status, state, situation, case, cause, agreement. That's what it means. Your legal status, okay? Situated within the limits of particular states, the federal lands inside the states, and over which they have no cession of jurisdiction for objects, either special or general. Little doubt exists that the rights and remedies in relation to it are usually the same as apply to other landholders within the states. So they're talking about the various jurisdictions, but you can't see it because you don't know about jurisdictions. But we need to find these, so we can know exactly where they're at and where they have jurisdiction over, where they have exclusive jurisdiction or concurrent jurisdiction. That way we know when they're off their lands trying to do stuff to us. When someone from the federal government tries to put a lien on your property, you know what questions to ask them. If you get welfare or disability or Social Security, you have to get it direct deposited. And when you get it direct deposited, you're agreeing that it's a federal benefit. And if it's a federal benefit, then they have jurisdiction over it. So if they want to take it, they can. That doesn't mean you can't fight for it. And I certainly would. So why did they create the Constitution? Okay, so here may be one reason. Okay, I don't think it was done for completely nefarious purposes. But Chief Justice Marshall, this is a congressional record from 1878. I think it was May 27th. This one's not it. I'll put the link in the description. So charters are a big thing, and we need to talk more about charters, and we need to do research on charters. I've started, but it's going to take me some time to put it all together. But this says, even Chief Justice Marshall, in pronouncing the decision of the court, said almost as much, for he uses the strong language, a repeal of the charter, the Dartmouth College Charter granted by the King in 1769. A repeal of this charter at any time prior to the adoption of the present Constitution of the United States would have been an extraordinary and unprecedented act of power. So they wanted to kick out the king because he had charters over the colonies. But they couldn't just kick him out. They couldn't just tell him get out, because he had to retrocede. He had to agree to leave. And he would never agree to leave because he wanted this country. So they had to institute the Constitution and adopt it, but they had to, I guess, keep it secret, because if the king found out, if there were spies and the king found out, then he would have probably started a war with them. Because without the Constitution, it would have been, quote, an extraordinary and unprecedented act of power. This is the congressional record, 1878. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I think it was March 27th. But I'll put it in the description. Okay, so yeah, March 27th, 1878. And I'll have to get the page number for you. But okay, so I think that's why they felt they had to institute the Constitution, because Patrick Henry was saying everybody seems so happy under the Articles of Confederation, and that's what we want, right? We want everybody to be happy. We want the inhabitants to be happy, and everyone to just get along, and it's going along fine. Why now are you trying to institute a constitution and force it down people's throat and having them adopt it before they even get a chance to understand what it's saying? And this may be the answer, because they had to kick out the king, and the king had sovereignty, and his sovereignty required them to ask him to relieve them of his presence, and he had to agree, because he was the sovereign and he would never have agreed. So having to do something like that, they had to make it appear as though the United States obtained some sort of sovereignty equal to or exceeding that the king had. And they did that with the Constitution. Perhaps that's why it's so vague. And that's my understanding of it. So like, share, subscribe. I hope this wasn't too long. I hope that you watched it till the end and that you have a much better understanding of the Constitution. If you don't, let's talk about it. I can shoot you some links if you have something in the comments you're wondering about that it's in this video that I could possibly explain. Let me know, and I'll be happy to have some interaction with people. And so like, share, subscribe, watch it a couple times. I think freedom is worth it. I've done all the research. I've had help from a few friends, and I think we all deserve a chance to enjoy freedom and our own individual sovereignty and happiness and relief that we're no longer subject to a tyrannical, out of control government. So please like, share, subscribe, and especially share. Just share, because there's a lot of people going through a lot of hard, difficult things concerning the government and what the government's doing to them. They're taking people's kids. They're putting people in prison. They're putting people for things that the federal government doesn't actually have authority to do, because people just don't know. And the more people that know this, the littler and littler and littler the government is going to get just through us having this knowledge. Okay, so please like, share, subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next video where I start to discover with you the power of charters.